You're listening to In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. Welcome to another episode of In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. We are very excited and honored to have Chief Justice Susan Christensen of the Iowa Supreme Court as our first guest, to learn about how a seemingly temporary job as a legal secretary led her down the path to the Iowa Supreme Court. Keep listening. Thank you for taking the time, Chief Justice Christensen, to do this interview for the podcast. We are actually doing it over the phone because while your offices are in Des Moines and you hear cases there with the full court, you actually spend a lot of your time working out of your hometown of Harlan, where you were born and raised a family of your own. So could you just tell us a little bit about what growing up in rural Iowa was like for you and how you've even seen it change over time?
Yes, Harlan is my hometown, and you're right. Born and raised is exactly where it is, and not only for myself, but for my husband, Jay, as well. So this is home for our children. It was home for our extended family, our parents and grandparents. And so we didn't have much to talk about as far as what was it like for you to grow up, because Jay and I were in the same first grade class and graduated high school together. But as far as comparing that growing up experience with my children, I think probably the biggest change I've seen is smaller families. We grew up in a school system where it was real common for some families to have 4, 8, 10, or even 12 children in their family. Wow. So our graduating class was pretty big, about maybe 270 kids. Now our kids' classes are much smaller. Families are smaller today, but also in a way it's kind of ironic. My children also have a bigger world. They know more about our own country and our world in this small town than I did growing up, just because of technology. So in a weird way, the community has grown, but in other ways it seems to be smaller in other ways.
And how many children and grandchildren do you have?
We have 5 kids, 4 boys and 1 daughter. And we, by Halloween this year, we will have our 6th grandchild.
Wow, that's so exciting. So you had mentioned in previous interviews, and you mentioned your husband, Jay, who was your high school sweetheart, and you had expected after high school to get a job to help put him through school. However, that seemingly temporary first job as a legal secretary altered your plans, as you are now Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court. So how did that first job change your trajectory?
You're right. The reason I even chose to be a legal secretary was because my boyfriend at the time had decided he was going to go to college, and I decided I just wanted to help him with college, and then we'd have a family, and I'd stay home with the kids. So I went to AIB in Des Moines to become a secretary, to have those skills for a year. So that first job I had, the first full-time job I had, was in Sioux City while Jay was an undergraduate, and we were already married by then. So after I became a mom, I continued to work as a secretary, and I realized I loved it. I loved the law. I loved everything about it. And I think my bosses that I was assigned, they appreciated that I really was passionate about it. And so they probably gave me more tasks than maybe some people at that juncture of my experience. But I loved it. I loved digging into title opinions. I loved finding some discrepancies in documents and finding out maybe if there was something more recent or helping make sure the citations were correct. So I loved that just as a secretary. And then it occurred to me, I think I want to take it to another level. And I was actually encouraged by one of my bosses to do that. And so by then we had just 1 child. And so I decided to go ahead and start going to school. And obviously we had our 2nd child while I was in undergrad, our 3rd child while I was in law school, and our 4th and 5th children when I was practicing law.
Wow.
So it changed my plans. I think everyone assumes, because I grew up in a family of law, I think everyone assumes that's why I decided to go to law school. And maybe way inside somewhere in my subconscious that certainly had an impact on me. It was actually physically working in an office that wasn't even a family law office that I got to be around it as an employee, and I loved it.
So you had mentioned going back to school and being a mom simultaneously. So you even, I believe, moved across the country a couple of times, and also your husband was attending optometry school while raising your family and getting your own law degree. How did you cope with that many moving parts in that short amount of time?
But the choices I made, it wasn't like I intentionally said I want to go to 4 different undergraduate schools, 4 years in a row, 1 year each school. I didn't set out to do that. Instead, what I set out to do was, to be committed to my marriage, my husband had taken a job in California, and then he decided after a year that he wanted to go back to school to be an optometrist. So there were reasons every time we moved somewhere, which were, to support ourselves down the road. So when I made those choices to change schools, it was because I actually had already made a choice for my family. And then if I wanted the school thing to fit in, I made that work. So it wasn't an easy thing to do, but I was truly committed to being a student and finishing it once I started. And then when I went to law school, I actually commuted for 3 years to the same law school, to Creighton. Mm-hmm. But the first 4 years undergrad were, and then if you include AIB, that'd be 5 years, 5 different schools. Every decision I made to make my path perhaps from the outside more difficult, it was the right decision for me. It was the right decision for my family.
So you finished your undergraduate and your law degree, and you had mentioned that law kind of is a career profession that runs in your family, and you went to work at your family's firm. Was there anything that you grew to love about that job that surprised you?
Yeah, I think that I didn't know what area of the law I would be interested in. I knew I was going to work in our family small town firm. We are a general practice firm, but there were enough of us, 4 lawyers, that we each kind of had our specialty. But when you're a brand new lawyer, at least I didn't know, where will my specialty be? What passion will I have? I had no idea. But within a very short period of time, I realized it was family law, juvenile law. I was a prosecutor, and in particular, I was drawn to cases of domestic violence. I felt a great passion for trying to help the victims. And I realized, I think all of those things, a similar foundation that they have is I enjoy that ability and that opportunity to help people in a tough situation. I think I didn't realize that. I was a psychology major undergrad. And I think maybe all the way along, I've made choices that are interesting to me. And I think that's done me well, that I think when you're passionate about something, you never work a day in your life. And so with that in mind, that feeling of helping someone in a really scary situation, getting them protection, or perhaps helping an adoption happen for a young family who wasn't able to have children together. I just love that feeling of helping people with some everyday problems have a better opportunity in life.
So what then influenced you to go from being a private practice lawyer who's advocating for clients to sitting on the bench as a district associate judge and hearing both sides of the case?
As a very good way of putting that question, what I wanted to do was continue to be involved in the courtroom setting. I have always been in the courtroom as a trial lawyer, as a prosecutor. And so I thought another opportunity of getting to do that would be as a judge. It's fun. It is really fun and rewarding to be a lawyer, to be zealously representing. People can say you're biased. Absolutely. You're supposed to be. You are fighting for your client. You're trying to do the best job you can, and you are zealously representing them. And that's an awesome feeling. I like that feeling a lot. But then it kind of got to the point, too, where I felt like I'd done it long enough, and I was really good at, I think, counseling clients, even though they wanted X, have you thought about Y? And being realistic about what I had a pretty good idea what the outcome might very well be once it got all the way to court based on my experience. So I kind of got to the point where I started thinking, instead of actually just giving one side of the story, it would be kind of, I think, very interesting and rewarding to be a part of the problem solving for the whole issue, not just one side. So I started looking into being a judge actually quite early in my career, maybe 5 years in. And I would not have applied for a district associate judge, and I didn't apply for many years because we were required to live in Pottawatomie County. We only had DAJs in Pottawatomie County, that's Council Bluffs. And I didn't want to move away from Harlan. And so I never applied for those spots. And then the legislature passed a statute that allowed there to be a certain type of a district associate judge that would have jurisdiction in an entire district. that means I could live anywhere in the 4th. And so at that moment, I decided, okay, maybe I'll start with that. And so, so I applied for that and was a district associate judge for about 8 years. And so after I was a district associate judge, an opportunity arose for a district position, and I applied for that and was appointed in 2015. And I was excited to become a district judge, to have an even broader opportunity in the courtroom beyond juvenile work, to also do all levels of criminal work, any civil proceeding, probate, real estate. But I also cannot deny or ignore the fact that every step I've taken has helped me with the next step. Being a lawyer in the courtroom, I'm very involved in committee work as a young lawyer, I think made me a stronger candidate and also a stronger district associate judge with that experience in my background. Likewise, that experience in juvenile court for many years gave me an immense understanding of some of the issues across our state that plague young families, whether it be drugs, alcohol, mental health, many of those issues. They are also very prevalent in district court, but you see them in with a different view. And so I think every step that I've taken has been helpful in the next step. In 2018, Justice Zager announced his retirement, and I hadn't really thought about the Supreme Court at that particular moment. I didn't know he was going to be retiring, so I didn't see that coming. But I decided at that moment that I thought it was a good opportunity to pursue. I thought rural Iowa would be a good fit on the bench. I thought my experiences, and for some of the reasons that I've already talked about, I know I have a unique background, but I also know many of the things that make me unique are very normal to many, many Iowans. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, I thought perhaps maybe my perspective could be something that would be unique and helpful at an appellate level as well, and to do my best to make sure that there's access to justice from all angles across our state, whether it be urban, rural, west, east, no matter where we live in the state. And I've always been very committed to my roots, and I respect that other people are committed to their roots as well, no matter where we are in the state. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to be at a higher level of our judicial system and put some of my experience and my prior history as a judge and lawyer to work at the appellate level.
Since you have held a judicial title at so many different levels, from district associate judge to district court judge and now Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, has there been a favorite aspect about each of those positions that you've held and how that differs as you move up towards the appellate level?
Oh, I'm sure I've had favorite things about each level. I've always said that any job that I have had before the current job, I've always loved, and I actually miss something about every position I've ever held. So maybe in terms of what do I miss about being a lawyer, for example, I miss seeing somebody on the street who knows that I'm a lawyer and has an issue that I know I could so quickly give them just a little bit of advice, or I could just help them, but I can't anymore. But I loved that when I was a lawyer. I loved being able to just help someone with something very simple or with something very scary. To have someone trust you one-on-one like that I was very honored to have had that relationship with so many people, and I miss that. As a district associate judge, especially in the arena of juvenile court, I miss getting to know those kids who have had way more happen in their short little lives than I had my entire life up to this point. I loved making them feel empowered in the courtroom. They had a voice, and I think anybody who was ever in my courtroom knew those kids better be here. Even if they're young, I want to watch parents parent their children. Mm-hmm. And even if they're only 3, 4, or 5, they all have antenna. They know what's going on in their life. And I wanted them to know, we are trying to help make your family as safe as can be and keep it together. And I miss that. I miss that feeling of helping a little kid that somebody else may not even know is out there. Perhaps they are homeschooled, or perhaps they are moving from place to place all the time and never really get to have roots. But I would always be the same judge. Iowa has one judge, one family. So I miss that about being a juvenile judge. Regarding being a district judge, I think I miss probably jury trials the most. What a great opportunity to have citizens in our state come in who technically have no ties to a legal proceeding, certainly not the one at issue, and to give them a chance, a peek into our daily lives as judges and the legal system, and to get to be that person, that hostess in a sense, that helps them see a case from beginning to end. That was a real positive part of my job as a district judge, and I miss that. Mm-hmm. As an appellate judge at the Supreme Court level, I have been surprised at the impact it has on young people, whether it be young girls. When I first got on the court, we were the only state in the nation that didn't have a woman on the court. I'm not the first woman on the Supreme Court, but there had not been a woman on the Supreme Court for several years. Mm-hmm. So I was surprised at cards, emails, little comments, pictures. When I go speak somewhere, little girls so often will want to have their picture with me. And to me, that should not have been such a big deal. I just felt like when I was a young lawyer, growing up in the legal profession and as a young lawyer, there were women on the Supreme Court. And at one time, there were 2 women on our Supreme Court. And mm-hmm. I didn't think anything of it. That's the way I thought it should be. So for these other young girls to think that it's unique and novel for me to be on the court really was humbling. And I think it made me take a step back and realize how important it is for me in this position to make sure that I do make myself available as much as I can on a level outside of the actual workday, to make sure that we educate people and we allow people to see a part of this career. It's a wonderful career. It's a wonderful profession. I love the law. And so I think that's probably at this higher level, with my visibility perhaps a little bit heightened, that's probably been what has surprised me the most.
It's apparent in everything that you've spoken about, the passion you have for children's justice. And you mentioned that that's an aspect that you miss about some of your old positions. So now, sitting on the Supreme Court, are there ways that you are able to continue working for children and advocating for them in a legal sense? And if so, how are you doing that?
When I first became a district associate judge was in 2007. And I think Chief Turnus became the chief perhaps around 6, 7, or 8. I can't remember the exact year. But anyway, she came to our district and showed a video about what it looks like from the eyes of a child. There's no video. There's video, but it's only words and music. There's no people or activity. And it is one of the most profound, powerful videos I've ever seen. And that is, I think, what actually sparked that interest in me to realize within the profession of law how much we could help these children, some of them who are extremely vulnerable. They've already been perhaps abused, or they are at risk of being abused, or maybe their parents just need that extra support to help them remain healthy and safe. So I think that was empowering for me to see that direct causal connection between the judiciary and helping children. So I don't doubt that's what actually sparked it. Now at this level myself, I just like Justice Turnus, I am chairing the Children's Justice State Council. So that gives me an opportunity at a state level to have sitting around the table normally, not right now during COVID, but right. Normally we sit around the table and we talk about the most important issues that involve juvenile justice in our state. And we have representatives from every potential avenue that you can think of that have to do with children in our state. And so that's one way that I get to maintain an avenue for my passion to make sure children are treated fairly and that they don't slip through the cracks within our own judicial branch.
So most listeners today will know you as the Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court, but they may not know that you are also the daughter of Jerry Larson, the longest serving Iowa Supreme Court Justice. Now, as the Chief Justice of that same state Supreme Court he sat on, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'd like to be remembered as the girl from Southwest Iowa who never missed an opportunity to listen, and to listen to whatever concern was raised, no matter whose voice that was. And based on those things that I would learn through listening, that I made good, solid, sound decisions for our judiciary and for the citizens of the state of Iowa.
We've talked a lot about your past job duties and your current job as Chief Justice, but when the day is done and you're able to, take off that cap of Chief Justice and be Susie again, How do you spend your time?
I play the piano. I love to play the piano. I used to play in a band for many years till life got too crazy with 5 kids. But I still play for myself. I, of course, enjoy having my grandchildren around. As I said, pretty soon that will be 6. We've always done things with our family. And when you have 5 kids and 3 of them are married and having children as well, that circle isn't so small. So we do have a bigger circle of family, and we enjoy tremendously spending time with our kids. We also, pre-COVID, love to go to movies, and that's been hampered a bit. So typically that would be something that you could see the Christensens doing. But I would say hanging around ourselves, our own family here in Harlan, or we will go to Ankeny or West Des Moines or Templeton where our kids live. And that's how we tend to spend our time, but almost always as a family.
Wow, wonderful. So I just have one more question for you today, and that is, what message about the role of courts in communities across the state do you want to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I think courts have a significant impact on the daily lives of most everyone in one way or another. And when someone walks into one of our 99 courthouses across the state, they expect justice to be administered in a fair and impartial manner. And I think as the chief of the Iowa Supreme Court, the message I'd like to leave them is that I am committed to making sure that actually happens, that the Iowa judicial branch has actually fulfilled our duty to provide fair and impartial justice to everyone in our state.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I will let you get back to your grandchildren and your weekend, and I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast hosted and produced by me, Marissa Gaal. If you would like more information about Iowa's courts, you can visit www.iowacourts.gov. You can also follow the Iowa Judicial Branch on Twitter and YouTube at Iowa Courts. This episode of In the Balance is now adjourned. Until next time.